right, welcome to I Guess I'll Do It with Pat House. Today is a comic I've known and enjoyed my entire career. We worked together several times, which I'll get right into those stories. Today, I have Christian Finnegan. Thank you for being here, man.
Hello, Patrick. How are you?
Doing very well as 2020 will allow me to be.
All is relative.
Yes, how are you?
I suppose that's an accurate way to describe my situation as well. I'm just fine, thank you.
Yeah, that's the answer I want from people because we're all fucked up and miserable. So I think just saying you're fine is like the best answer.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. We're all kind of struggling in our own little ways or whatever. But I will say that honestly, this whole year has felt like stepping into a warm bathtub for me. It's like, oh. The way I feel all the time internally is now external. So it all feels very natural to me.
Yeah, man, this is something. And, I'll get into that in a second. I usually start the podcast by sharing a memory or two of meeting my guests. And with you, I hosted for you at Helium in Philly years ago. Mm-hmm. And then you came back to headline a one-nighter and you asked me to be your feature, and I think you were the first person to ask me to feature, and I never forgot that. So, thank you.
And look at the rocket fueled boost I have provided to both you and me. Look at where we are now.
And we also, for right before you taped your Contraire special, I drove you all around Philly so we could put flyers all over college campuses.
Yes, that was very nice of you. Yeah, we drove around all the college campuses, and I hung the posters that I spent way too much money on and used very little. But,
yes, we had lunch at the Reading Terminal Market, and
I'll take your word for it.
That special was great. I had a great time that night, and it's still a great special.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's very kind.
So, my stepdad saw me host for you at Helium. He's 81 now. So this is, 10 years ago. He's in his early 70s. He saw me host for you at Helium, and then when you had me feature for you, I brought him into the city to go to dinner, and as a surprise, brought him to Helium, and he was over the moon that night. You're still one of his favorite comics. So,
I can't tell him to raise the bar. Well, give him my best. If I'm not mistaken, we went out to dinner once. Was that with your dad or my dad?
Mine. We went to the Irish pub, I believe.
That sounds appropriate to me. Yes.
Yeah, because that was like where the comics hung out, and the chicken fingers there are phenomenal. That's pretty much the only thing I've ever gotten from that place.
And it was weird because you got really drunk and you started screaming, "You're not my real dad," which was super awkward.
That's just every Wednesday, but.
Okay. It was weird because you were yelling it at me, which seems doubly inappropriate.
So, when I'm just going to dive right into it. So,
dive in.
Yeah. So you're from Massachusetts, correct?
I am indeed.
Very cool. And you're in Queens now, right?
Is it really cool?
I mean, I've only, dude. I've been to Massachusetts twice. I opened for Tom Segura at the Warner Theater, and that was one of the best shows of my entire life. And I did one show at the Boston Comedy Festival, and I ate my balls. So those are my only two Massachusetts experiences.
Hey, if you were batting 500, you'd be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
if this is baseball. I was born. I was actually born in Albany, but I moved to Massachusetts when I was like 4. So I think of Massachusetts as being where I grew up, and I moved to New York City when I was 18, and now I am there, although not currently because of greater pandemia.
Yes,
we're spending some of our time in the city and the rest of the time in upstate New York in Sullivan County, like near where Woodstock took place.
Oh, very cool. Did you move to New York at 18 for comedy, or was that just college?
I went to college. I had no inkling that I wanted to go into stand-up comedy. I kind of came of age. I think on some level I hated stand-up comedy because probably I secretly wanted to do it. Like I really, I owned a lot of comedy albums and I was obsessed with, Bill Cosby himself and Eddie Murphy, Raw and Delirious and George Carlin and that when I was a kid. But when I was kind of in my sort of angry teen years was sort of the real boom period of comedy in that sort of like late 80s where everything was sort of, guy with a purple blazer with the sleeves pushed up, and the mullet. And,
Oh God, yeah.
I sort of defined myself as being very alt. And, I wore a black turtleneck and I had a Morrissey pompadour and wrote poetry and things like that. And so I didn't have any inkling at all that I wanted to do stand-up comedy when I went to college. It was only, I think I was 24 when I actually started doing it.
Okay, perfect. So then what was the catalyst there? What was the bump from being a stand-up fan with no inkling of actually doing it to at age 24? Being like, yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Well, I'd gone to college as an actor, and I hated it. I hated what being an actor was. And I switched halfway through to being a playwriting major. And after college, I spent a couple of years working in publishing at a literary agency, and I thought I was going to be like a writer. And I did some sort of freelance movie and music reviewing type stuff. And then I kind of quickly realized that I wasn't doing any writing, and I have no fucking self-discipline. And so I kind of, this new magazine had just come out in New York called Time Out New York. And they would have these very extensive listings of stuff to do. And so I started just kind of going to various things around the city, just like, what am I going to do? Like, what's my place? And so I started going to, poetry slams and sketch comedy shows and readings and all sorts of stuff. And at the time there was this sort of burgeoning New York City alt comedy scene at places like Surf Reality and Collective Unconscious, which were two kind of very small performance venues in the Lower East Side. And I saw UCB, like the original four, doing a show before they even had their own venue, just like at a crappy place called Solo Arts Group.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was super cool. And it kind of, and also a Chris Rock special, Bring the Pain, had come out, and I really liked that.
Oh,
and
dude, it's so good. I actually listened to that probably a few months ago, but definitely during this pandemic, I listened to that.
Yeah, it's super good. And it kind of was sort of an awakening that, I kind of assumed that, I didn't realize that you could kind of do stand-up comedy and be the kind of person I would want to hang out with. I kind of always thought that you had to be that sort of annoying dude who was just on all the time and very kind of the way a lot of people still think of stand-up comics, and not unjustifiably. I certainly know a lot of those people. But I didn't know that you could kind of have a semi quote unquote alt sensibility and still do stand up. Oh, and the other big thing that kind of got me into comedy around that time is I was a huge fan of the Ben Stiller show, which was like hugely influential to me, just in terms of kind of opening my eyes to different things that comedy could be, and also that you
absolutely that show covered a lot of ground. That's like a hidden gem. It's one of those things where, like, if somebody mentions it, you either keep the conversation, you move on because you don't know what they're talking about, or like you could spend the next 2 hours talking about that show.
Yeah, that becomes the conversation. Yeah, it's super, earlier today, and I don't know if you want to carbon date this podcast, but the trailer for this new Bob Odenkirk action movie is all over Twitter. It's like by the guy who directed John Wick. It's called Nobody. And there's this red band trailer that's going around, and it's Bob Odenkirk like kicking ass and stuff, which is just so bizarre. And everybody's making Mr. Show jokes appropriately because Mr. Show's great. But to me, it's like, that's the Ben Stiller Show guy. He'll always be the Ben Stiller Show guy. And Janine Garofalo will always be Ben Stiller to me, and Andy Dick. And, like that's kind of just, that show meant a ton to me at the time. And so I kind of started, I ended up going to this open mic called Face Boys Open Mic Night at Surf Reality, which was this sort of weirdo kind of thing. It started at 8:00 Sunday night and went until like 3 a.m. And it was everything from stand-up comedy to angry poetry to ranting about Mayor Giuliani to whatever. And it kind of was like a nice introduction to the scene for me. I don't think I would have started doing comedy if I had to start in the clubs. Just because I felt there was a boys clubby kind of aggressive anger that comedy clubs gave me at the time, and still give me to a certain degree, even though I'm much more of a club comic now. And so I started going to that open mic night, and then there's a woman named Reverend Jen who ran a show, a Collective Unconscious, called the Anti-Slam on Wednesdays. And so that's kind of how I got into doing. And I just kind of gravitated. I was in a sketch group at the time. Like I was in a sketch group for a couple of years, and I was doing stand-up as well. And eventually the sketch group kind of ran its course, just because it's a pain in the ass to be in a sketch group, trying to arrange rehearsal times and bring fucking costumes and props.
Yeah, I've never been in a sketch group, but I mean, a lot of my friends have, and I've opened for them. So I've seen them backstage with all their props and 10 people trying to organize stuff. And I just feel so grateful that I just go out, do 10 minutes, and then I have nothing else. Like,
yeah. I mean, I really did enjoy it. I thought we did some really cool stuff, and I really, I was proud of the stuff we were doing, but it's just, I'm not a joiner when it gets right down to it. I tend to be a pretty solitary person, I think. And I just would rather kind of be my own band. So,
God, yeah. I mean, 100%. I'm the exact same way. Do you remember your very first set? The very first time you took your ideas on stage and did stand up?
Yeah. It was at this Sunday night open mic that I did. And I had a long, I think most of the material I did was about how much I hated the musical Rent. I hadn't even seen it. It was just that at the time, all
even better.
All the subway cars in New York had Rent ads. And I guess just because, I lived in the Lower East Side or East Village, Alphabet City, depending on when. And I was, a guy from New England, a kid, upper middle class kid from New England who moved to this sort of gritty part of New York City. And so I think it annoyed me so much because it reminded me of me and people I knew so much. The sort of like, oh, I'm so poor. Please don't make me go back to Connecticut and ask my parents for money, like that kind of thing. And which, is totally unfair because I'm sure that's not what Rent. I still haven't seen Rent, but I have a vague sense of what it is now. But I just, so most of it was ranting about that, and I don't know if you had this experience, but the first time I did it, it went really well because I had spent weeks upon weeks or months sort of honing certain ideas. And then the next week I got into my head that I had to go up with completely different stuff. And so it was just all stuff I'd written that week. And that's when I ate an unholy dookie.
Yep. I mention this every episode because I'm talking to every comic about their first set, so we get in a conversation. I tell my story. The short version is I did very well my very first 2 times on stage, and then I bombed like the next 12. I was only getting up on Wednesdays. I started at a club in Philly called the Laugh House, and I didn't have any friends yet. I didn't know about other open mics. The internet, it wasn't as prevalent as it is now, to where you could really like find stuff. So I was only going to the Laugh House every Wednesday for months, and the first 2 times were great, and then I didn't have a good set for like 3 more months. But I kept going every Wednesday, and I kept getting up. And then I started to piece stuff together. I was like, okay, this joke has never worked. Stop doing it. This joke works half the time. Let's fix it. You naturally learn how to like fix it after, I don't know, a good 12 or 15 times on stage, if you care.
Yeah, and that it's not just like maybe there are those rare occasions where you have a great joke, but just the planets align poorly and it doesn't go over well. Somebody coughs over a punchline, or maybe you forget some word that kind of is crucial to the setup, or maybe it's just raining outside and people are in a bad mood. But, if a joke isn't working 5 times in a row, that should be a good sign to you that it needs to be taken back into the shop. So do you
have anything in your act right now, or like before COVID, in very recent times, that you find funny that still doesn't quite hit, that you do for you?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I definitely have kind of what I refer to in my head as a tool shed, which is, sometimes if a joke isn't going well. I mean, I've been doing comedy for 109 years at this point, and
what's the real year?
1997 is when I started. So 20 in April, I think it'll be 23 years.
Okay.
Or no, it'll be 24 years. I'm not very good at math.
It's not a math. It's not a math podcast. Don't even worry about it.
I'm sure there probably are math podcasts. That's a weird fan base.
Yep.
Anyhoozle, what? Oh, that at this point, I generally believe that if something amuses me, that if I think something's funny, there's a joke in there, but I just may not have found the way in yet. Like I haven't found the way to phrase it, where maybe I come at it from the opposite direction, or you set it up differently or whatever. And so if a joke isn't really working, but that I think is kind of funny, sometimes I'll just kind of put it aside for a few months and then come back to it later. And it's weird how often just giving it that air, obviously you can't do that with stuff that's more topical, but there's a lot of stuff. I have something coming out in early 2021 that I kind of just did to amuse myself during quarantine. And some of the material on it is like 10 years old, at least maybe 15 years old. It's like jokes, like you were saying, that I really liked, that just for whatever reason never made it on an album, or material that kind of just never fit. And so I kind of polished it up and worked it into a set. And then some of the rest of the stuff is stuff that I kind of have only written during the pandemic. And so it kind of had the opposite problem, where it was like so new that, I don't know. I'm really kind of happy with it. I'm excited about it, but it doesn't have that spit shined, forged in iron quality that certain bits have had that I've recorded in the past, because I've taken them on the road for 8 months and really hammered them out.
Dude, exactly. And you want to hear something nuts? You're like the only person that not many people know. I'm recording my third album tomorrow.
Oh, wow. Where?
So I bartend at a country club. It's a public golf course. We have a big ballroom. And I do shows there every year. We do like comedy night weekends where we'll have 200 people Friday, 200 people Saturday. So I've had these shows this weekend on the calendar for books, but because of COVID, everything is socially distant. So I'm doing one show tomorrow, one show Saturday for 60 people, and I'm recording them both. And we're just going to fucking try to do it.
Very cool. How do you feel about the preparation level of the material? Do you feel like it's ready to go?
I do, because most of it, I'm doing jokes I've wrote about COVID since COVID. So right. Not everything, most of the stuff I've done on stage, but my last album was 2 years ago. And after that came out, I was doing a shit ton of writing, and I was on the road with Dan Cummins a lot. So there's like a really good 35 to 40 minutes that's tried and true, and then a 15 that's like shaky, but I have faith in that 15. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this isn't going to be
promising young upstarts.
Yes, this is not 100% gold, but I mean, I'm definitely happy with 80% of it, and that's where editing comes in. If something doesn't I'll take something out, or if something bombs and I riff on myself and make fun of myself, then I'm keeping it.
Well, and this may be me lying to myself on some level, but the special that we were talking about before, Au Contraire, the one I recorded in Philly, there's a lot of things I really like about it, but the one thing that I dislike about it when I listen to it is that it sounds recited more than performed. I feel like maybe it was too hammered out. Like it felt, or maybe it was just nerves, because it was kind of a big night for me, and it was my first special, and there was a lot of moving parts. I was but when I listened to it, it sounds almost too spit shined to me. Like I could use a few more frayed ends, a little bit more of a loose quality. And so sometimes, and I think especially now, I might be wrong about this, but it feels like the way comedy is going, generally speaking, I don't necessarily know that everybody always wants to see the completely spit shine version. I feel like, I know that sometimes in albums that I love, the sort of off the cuff, not that you're not improv necessarily, but there's kind of an adorable Shaggy Dog quality to some comedy now. Like not everything has to be
perfect.
Letter perfect. Like not everything has to be an 80s Seinfeld album where every syllable has been rehearsed 40,000 times.
No, I agree with that. Like you don't want something to be crystal clear perfect. Bill Burr recorded his first album. It's called Emotionally Unavailable at the Laugh House in Philly, where I started. And you can hear like a little bit of crowd chatter. He does some crowd work. He gets heckled and he kind of doesn't go off, but he addresses it. And in the liner notes, he said, like, I kept this because this is what happens on any given night. And I always think about that. Like, it's just the real deal. The material is phenomenal, but there is a heckler, some crowd interaction. But he's like, no, this is just what happens. And I think it's so cool that he kept all that in there.
Yeah. I'm not ever gonna be the sort of I'm not like Big J Okerson or something like that, where I'm just crowd work based, and I mean, I like to be able to do crowd work and things like that, but I appreciate a well written and a well performed bit, and that's always going to be kind of where my heart is. But there are those times, like Greg Giraldo, who was a guy who probably the first dude who I opened for on a semi regular basis. And I think it's Midlife Vices where the sleepy Rasta. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, dude,
it's like the greatest thing. And if you're listening to this and you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google Greg Giraldo sleepy Rasta. It's the funniest. It's a dude in a massive hat and dreadlocks falls asleep in the middle of his taping. And
yep, his Comedy Central taping.
Yeah, and it's so the way he addresses it is just so perfect. And it again, you would almost think it was written. But when you see it on camera, it's like it's clearly not written, but it's really great.
He was a master, dude. Like his death, like really affected me. I hosted his last week at Helium, and in Philly last week. His last week in Philly, and he was doing all that Midlife Vices material, and he was fucking murdering.
Yeah,
like he had, dude. It was just something I still think of to this day. He was crushing beyond crushing. And that special came out great.
In many ways, I think stylistically, I think I was kind of in the same ballpark as him, not talent wise, but I mean, in terms of the way, that kind of very written bits, a lot of, it wasn't one liners. It's, large chunks, but that have multiple punchlines and stuff like that. I don't remember what I was going to say. No, I do know what I was going to say. Is that there was something about the way he attacked a topic that kind of crossed over, and this is inside baseball shit. Like if you're not,
that's what I love. That's 100% why I started this podcast.
But that it was kind of undeniable that. I remember seeing him go up at, I think Crash Test. I think it was Aziz Ansari's show at UCB a long time ago, which was, an alt comedy venue and an alt comedy crowd. And there was at the time, it's less the case now, but at the time there was a really strong divide between like club comedy and alt comedy. And people didn't really cross over between the spaces that much. I always kind of did, which always made me feel like a bit of an odd duck. But there felt like there were sort of battle lines drawn between the two. And but Giraldo did this show at UCB that I saw, and it was funny because you could just feel all of the 20-something cool kids kind of sitting on their hands, kind of because it's what Greg was doing sounded to them like club comedy because it was actually written and polished and not like so what else is going on? What I mean? Like it wasn't a bunch of people staring at their notes, and it was definitely more of like and he was a married guy, and so he's talking about married guy topics, but just through the sheer force of his talent, it was just undeniable. And by the end of the set, he was killing, and it was really like fun for me to watch because having one foot in each of those worlds, I knew exactly what about him they were negatively reacting to, but just his talent and presentation just won them over the course of 12 minutes, which was kind of. And I remember thinking like that's exactly the pocket I kind of want to be in. And it can be kind of a frustrating, lonely career path in comedy in the sense that you're never really one or the other. Like I've never, when I was younger, I would go and do these alt comedy shows, or I would go and do like clubs, and I would feel like people were looking at me like I was some weird, 10-eyed beast. And then I would go to some alt show and I'd feel like I was Jeff Foxworthy.
Yeah.
And so, but that's always been kind of like, my sort of model is those people who could kind of play both rooms.
That's cool to work both angles. I mean, I consider myself a strictly just like a club comic through and through. Did Greg use you as an opener? Did he bring you on the road to feature?
I mean, I wouldn't even. It's not like Greg plucked me. He didn't like pull me from the chorus and say like, "You're a star, kid." My first manager was Greg's manager, and so I think he hooked me up on some gigs with Greg, and so I did like a few road gigs, probably 6 or 7 college gigs in a few road weekends, but nothing like. But at the time, that felt like a lot. At the time, that felt like a phase of my comedy career. It was probably only a few months when you really think about it, but it was enough to kind of get a handle on the dude. And also, I worked at Tough Crowd for a year. I was a writer at Tough Crowd with Colin Quinn, and so I worked with Greg a bit in that context as well. Dude,
that's so awesome. I love Greg stories. I'll keep this obviously very brief. My favorite Greg story. So a show called Comedy Central Live was coming to Philadelphia, and it was Birbiglia, Burr, and Giraldo. And me and my friend Dave had tickets. Yeah. This was 2006, 2007. Me and my friend Dave had tickets to the show just as fans, and I'm literally walking to the gig from my apartment, and my phone rings, and it's Mike Berkowitz, and he said, we need a host tonight. We called Helium looking for somebody, and the manager, who was Ben at the time, said, you were going to be at the show, so if you want the spot, call me back and let me know. So I stood there frozen, like, what the fuck? Is this real? I called him back, and then 2 hours later, I was hosting that show with Birbiglia, Burr, and Giraldo.
Honestly, that's probably better that it happened that way. Like if you had been given weeks to stress it, you probably would have.
No, absolutely. And dude, now at this point, I'm doing comedy like 2 years. I probably have like 15 minutes, and like 10 of it is probably really good. Yeah. And I did all of it up top. And I forget who it was. It may have been, Birbiglia went on first, so it had to either be Burr or Giraldo wanted me to do a minute or two in between, and I was like, oh, fuck. And I just tried to do some crowd work in front of like 1,200 people, and it worked. There was like an energy that night. The crowd didn't know who I am. I'm a comic on stage just like them. So there was like a weird phenomena that took place that night too. But looking back, that was still like the coolest night of my entire life.
Well, and people always get it inverted. Like a crowd of 1,200 people is so much easier than a crowd of 12 people.
Yes.
When a big crowd like that, especially when they're jazzed for a TV taping and stuff like that, you will, generally speaking, do pretty well. And if you do poorly, it's because you're pulling like a Cindy Brady in your head, like that, you're blanking, but it's not because the audience isn't there. The audiences for those things tend to be pretty hot. So as long as you can kind of keep your wits together and not poop your pants, you'll probably do pretty well.
Yeah, I learned a lot that night, but it was funny because I wasn't even hosting at Helium at the time. Like I was still very new to comedy, between 2 and 3 years. So here I am. I'm not even hosting at the club, but now I'm fucking hosting this show. So that kind of gave me some like cred around town, which was nice.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. I mean, those things matter. I mean, it's it's even more the case now. But I saw this sort of evolution of getting a late night set as being a career making opportunity to something that just simply gave you a little bit of cred with your peers, which is what it is now, if it's even that. Like I don't even know if getting a late night set even means a whole lot to other comics at this point. But the days of oh my God, I did Carson and now I have a year full of bookings and I'm a big star. Those were just dying. I remember Giraldo telling me that the first time he did the Montreal Comedy Festival, that there were literally like network heads with checkbooks in the audience. Oh. And and he got like a pilot, like when he'd been doing comedy for like 3 years or something, and it went really, really badly. And that's kind of tanked him for a while. And that's why he kind of just dove straight into stand-up and didn't really try to do TV stuff for a long time. But, by the time I was doing like those festival shows, and it was kind of like, all right, well, maybe you'll get an agent out of this. Maybe you'll be able to get a couple late night sets or whatever. And now I don't even know what it is. I mean,
Dude, I don't know. I don't know either. I don't know either.
Yeah.
For years, I let go of it now, but for years I just wanted to do a late night spot because it was validating for me as a career, because you could be like, oh my God, Christian Finnegan did Conan, Mark Maron did Conan, Maria Bamford did Conan. I want to get on Conan so I can put my name up there with them.
Yes.
And I'd done so many fucking television auditions and like nothing ever came of it. And now I feel like, I don't know, I feel like that want and that need and that credit just fizzled out.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's an article that came out in the New York Times yesterday about Carmen Lynch. I don't know if you happen to see that. It's
I did not, but I'll check it out. I don't know her, but she's so fucking funny. She's so funny.
She's great. Jason Zeineman, the guy who writes about comedy for the New York Times, basically talked about how Carmen was a respected but not famous comic. So a comic who had 6 late night sets under her belt. And then she started adapting a couple of her bits to TikTok and Reels, the Instagram version of TikTok. Yeah. And that has gotten her so much more attention than any of her late night sets ever did. And that's, to be perfectly frank, it's very depressing to me because
it is. It is. Well, that Sarah Cooper girl who did all the President Trump impressions on TikTok. She has millions of followers now from that kind of thing. I don't know if she's a stand-up. I don't know her. I'm not talking shit on her. Some of her videos really made me laugh, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know her well personally, but we followed each other on Twitter for years or whatever, and I'd interacted with her, and she was kind of, from what I gather, she was a comic, but not really doing bringer shows, and not like a club regular, but would apparently get on produced shows and things like that. But always funny, and she'd written a couple books. She was mostly doing like office comedy, like books about sort of humorous books about office culture, but was always very smart and very funny. And then the Trump thing, which have made me laugh as well, but probably were the least thoughtful things I'd seen her do. That's just the way the world is. I remember, my one of my best friends, his definition of the term genius is he always refers to the guy who created the step aerobic. That like in the 80s, there was that plastic step when people were doing aerobics, and he'd be like, that dude is a genius. Like, what are you talking about? It's just a piece of plastic. It's like, exactly. And he's a billionaire from it. Like, that's genius.
I think Brian Regan Brian Regan had a bit about that. Let me run down the stairs to get my stare. Like,
yeah. But yeah, I mean, and so that's kind of the way I feel about, like, I don't, the sort of hate you see from comics regarding not just Sarah, but a lot of comics who have had a lot of attention online. It's like, God, you sound so old and so cranky, and just get over it, man. Sorry that the culture hasn't moved in exactly the direction that you wanted it to move.
Yep.
But it's like you're arguing with bad weather at this point. It's like you're arguing with rain.
It's so disheartening in a way, because for the past 5 years, I've been on the road a lot, like 2 to 3 weekends a month, mostly a feature. But the past 2 years, I've gotten more headlining work and stuff. And it's so disheartening when you're in the comedy club and like, next week, the headliner is a YouTube star, or their flyer says like viral sensation. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. I spent 16 years of my life cutting my teeth in comedy clubs to do this. And then some dipshit fucking jerks off on camera. And it's like, from Pornhub, Joe Jerkoff. And he's selling out comedy clubs.
I mean, but that is what it is, man. And it's like, I hate, I hate that too. And I hate that, you'll see those soap opera stars who are, and Mick Foley seems to be a very funny and personable dude, but like when he first started making the comedy club circuit, I was like, what? Like, why is this dude doing comedy? But that's just, that is what it is. And people have to kind of, before people really started monetizing online, around 2010 to 2015, when people were becoming hugely famous online, but had no way to monetize it, that a lot, this sort of doing stand-up kind of became the sort of the cheap way to try to make money off of your viral fame. Now, I actually get the feeling that a lot of these YouTubers, it's like, there's no need to do stand-up clubs anymore, because they can make much more money doing, branded content and shit like that, which is fine. I just think that, we have to accept as stand-up comics that what we're doing may not as performing road sort of club traditional stand-up comics, it's not necessarily where the mainstream culture is going to be, and you have to be okay with that. It's like being a jazz musician, and I hate when people talk about comedy being like jazz, but I just mean in terms of market, in terms of the market share, that if you're an actual a high-end jazz guitar player or a jazz bassist or something like that, yes, you are 50 times the musician that anybody on the top 40 is, but you have 1/50th of the audience. But that is what it is, and you just no one's forcing you. Go out and try to be a rapper if you want to. Go out and try to be Drake if you're pissed that you spent 20 years learning how to play guitar, and now some 15-year-old YouTube, or TikTok rapper is more famous than you. Well, try to do that. I don't want to do that.
Exactly. I don't want to do that either.
Yeah.
Because that's where like my heart is, and probably yours. Like I love stand-up comedy. So no, I'm not going to be a YouTube star with 1 million followers, but it truly makes me the happiest to walk into a club, have a great set, whether it's 20 minutes, 30, 45 an hour, and then, just getting the reaction from that. That's like what
that has to be its own reward. It really has to be.
And I swear to God. So obviously COVID, everybody's shows came to a screeching halt. I'm doing this album tomorrow. I'm doing a small, socially distant open mic in Wilmington, Delaware tonight, and I'm excited because I get to go. The crowd there is half decent. They actually pay attention sometimes, but I have new ideas I want to do before I record this weekend, and I'm like genuinely excited to do live stand-up comedy tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it's we all have to recalibrate. One thing early on in the pandemic, I don't think there had been a 5-day period that I hadn't done stand-up comedy. I mean, I generally in normal, quote unquote, normal times, I'd like to do between 7 and 12 sets a week if possible. And I had it in my head that like I couldn't go, other than maybe like a vacation, like I couldn't go more than 2 days without doing stand-up comedy. Just couldn't do it. And the early months of the pandemic kind of laid bare that lie. It's like, yes, you can go a month, like get over yourself. Like it'll all still be there. Like you might be a little rusty when you come back, but come on, you can.
Yep.
Especially if you're not writing new material. It's like, your hilarious bit about, table mats will stay. It's not going to, evaporate in thin air. But, now it's to the point where when I do stand up, it makes me almost sad because, it reminds me of how much of my self-worth and just personal mental health is reliant upon getting up on stage and doing stand-up, which, is not entirely healthy. And even after all these months, I really still haven't found any replacement for that. That's not drug or alcohol based, which is ideal.
Well, yeah, no, I hear that, man. The Jameson bottles are aplenty the past couple months.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people are going through that, but I'm trying to sort of taper off or cancel that entirely for the winter because the winter is going to be it's January, February, March are not going to be ideal, and so.
No.
Over the summer, at least there were outdoor shows. So I was at least able to get up, 3 or 4 times a week or something like that. And, in a park, just enough to kind of wet your whistle. And, I did a Zoom corporate 2 nights ago, and that is something semi akin to doing stand up. It's kind of like methadone. It's not heroin, but it's something. But it's going to be a bit stultifying. It's going to be very stifling for the next few months, and I think that I have to prepare myself for that. And I think a lot of comics need to. It's just like,
yeah,
it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Just find another hobby for a few months to occupy your brain.
Dude, I started this podcast, and it's been like a lifesaver some weeks, just to because I love talking comedy with comics. So this has been like my little escape. How did your Zoom show go? Because I did my first one just last week.
Well, I've done a bunch of them at this point, and they're okay if you understand what they are. It's a different medium. There is a certain aspect to it which is different than live shows, but like more fun than live shows, which is that you can really kind of play with the personal quality. Like you can deliver your material in a way that's a little more conversational and a little more like you're speaking to someone individually. You know, it's like when you're talking to the camera, you treat that camera as a person, not as millions of people or hundreds of people or whatever. So you can kind of deliver your material in a way as if you're kind of doing it for someone as opposed to a whole crowd. And you can kind of play with dynamics by kind of like leaning into the microphone and things like that. So, I mean, there's some fun aspects to it. I mean, I think that there are going to be a lot of comics who younger comics who maybe weren't fully formed yet, who are I'm kind of curious to see what happens once things get back to quote unquote normal. There's this idea that everything's just going to snap back to the way it was. And maybe for people like you or me who've been doing it for longer, maybe it will be. But there's a whole, group of comics who've maybe been only doing it for 2 or 3 years. And so they're not fully formed as comics yet. And so their experience of what stand-up comedy is going to be really informed by how this period has gone. And they're much more active doing Zoom shows and whatnot. And I don't necessarily know that they'll continue to do Zoom shows once they don't have to, but I think that the kind of comedy that comes back to clubs will be different and potentially more personal. Not necessarily personal in terms of content, but personal in terms of not as like performance-y. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And, I agree with everything you said there because it really sucks for people who just started. Like, comics, like people who are established, people who are already headlining or already featuring or already hosting at the club will probably get that work back because the club knows they're funny. So people who just started are like under them, like almost like a second time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Roy Wood Jr. had said something to that effect back in like April that everybody's going to take a hit because everyone's going down at least a step or two. The kind of comics, and this was honestly even before things were really shut down, but the comics who were playing arenas were going to be playing theaters. The comics who were playing theaters are going to be playing clubs. The comics were playing clubs are going to be playing, one-nighters, and it was just everyone is going to have to adjust to that for a long time. And even once things get back, I don't necessarily know how quickly the audiences will return. I could see it going either way. I could see people being, again, it depends on, the vaccine and how many people are fucking idiots and refuse to take it. But I could see there being a real renaissance of just people dying to be out in crowds again. Cause, going out to concerts and seeing bands and things like that, just because, that's sort of like, we're free, we're finally able to go out and do it again. Or will there still be this lingering attitude of like, I don't know if it's safe yet. And I remember, I think it was Laurie Kilmartin, when the first of those Michigan protests were going on, where all those people were showing up at the state house and banging on the door, demanding that the lockdown end. I think it was Laurie who had tweeted like, first back at the comedy clubs. And that was so super depressing to me. Again, she's so right. She's so right.
She's so funny. She is one of my favorite comics to watch on stage. Both of her books are hysterical, and she is on fire on Twitter.
Yeah,
she is one of my favorite comics.
Well, she's always been. She worked a tough crowd as well when I did, and she's always just like her jokes are just carved in stone. Like they're letter perfect. They're always
an absolute wordsmith, short and to the point. Doesn't miss a syllable.
Yeah.
Put in a good word for me. I emailed her twice to do the podcast. Yeah, it's going to be strange when shit gets back to normal. But I feel like there definitely are people that want to get out there. And as a comedy fan, like I know Brian Regan's doing clubs. I would fucking love to see Brian Regan in a club with only me and 70 other people.
Right.
Instead of a 3,000 seater.
But every like to your former point is like every night that you see Brian Regan at a club is a night that somebody who used to play Cubs isn't playing it.
Absolute. No, I get it. It's just such a, and I wonder, like, it's there's going to be bottlenecking like crazy.
Yeah.
Like everybody who's a headliner is going to try to get at every club.
Yeah.
Everybody who used to, it's all going to bottleneck.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, I kind of have seen it from both ends because, you know, my wife owns a small venue, QED Astoria, and I was telling her, and we're not sure yet whether that will survive, and if it does survive, it'll survive in its former form. It might be more of a shop and less of a venue when things get, when, you know, because that's what it is right now. Right now, it's just kind of open for retail for Christmas. And she's more selling like games and puzzles and books and stuff just because she's not allowed to open for performances. But I told her, you know, we were talking, I was like, if you are able to make it through this, the Creek and the Cave, which is a beloved New York venue,
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago. And I was saying, you know, and so we don't know whether QED will last either. But I was saying, if you are able to stay open, once you do open, the level of talent you're going to be able to book is going to be much higher than what you were booking before, just because everyone is going to be desperate for sets. And so you're going to be able to book a lot of like higher end comics who maybe wouldn't want to make the trek out to Queens. But now it's just like, what, 20 minutes in the subway? Fucking absolutely. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
So, you know, from that perspective, I can see it being beneficial for certain venues, but for the sort of, it's comics like me, honestly, who I feel like are going to really bear the brunt. Comics who kind of aren't new, like there's no sort of excitement of discovery, but aren't like fully famous either. So I'm kind of girding myself for that. Like I genuinely don't know if there will be a place for me in the sort of in the constellation once this is all over, but whatever, it's not going to stop me from doing comedy. It's all I can do. So
no, I hear you. This year fucking blows.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the short of it, and it's like not going to get any better for the first half of 2021 at least.
No, you know, but it is what it is. And in life, I hate when people say it is what it is. So I hate that I just said it. But life is long and life is unexpected, and who knows? We just don't know. We just don't know. Like you know, I try to talk my wife off a ledge sometimes with her venue just because she's like, oh my God, should I just close it? This is going to be terrible, or we're going to lose all this money, and et cetera and so forth. And I just say, you know, yeah, but there's just no point in even making a real firm plan right now. Yeah, think of possibilities. Think of, like, I have fully tried to conceive of life and career paths for the next 5 years of my life that involve stand-up comedy and do not involve stand-up comedy, because I just don't know what to expect. But there's no any sort of hard plan you were to make right now is just your silly attempt to try to exercise control over something over which you have no control.
Yeah, and to calm yourself down.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm
going to do this. Yeah.
And just like, so my feeling is like, you know, take care of yourself emotionally, come up with some different concepts of what your life could be that would make you happy, and then reapproach it in, say, March or April and see where things stand. Because it's really not going to be before then. I don't think anything is going to be able to be really arranged and set in stone before then.
No, you're absolutely right. I'm even thinking closer to like spring, if not summer. Like I'm not counting on the first half of the year being
right. Yeah. But
I'm
thinking like the spring is when at least we should have some idea of the time frame. Like, okay, yes. Look, maybe by 4th of July, people will be able to go out and go to shows again, you know, writ large. And hope, obviously, like at QED, we have a backyard, and we were doing shows in the backyard during the summer when the numbers in New York were really low, and it was going really well. Like, it wasn't paying all the bills, but it was paying some of the bills, and it was certainly, the comics were thrilled. And so once spring comes around, at the very least, we'd be able to go back and start doing that again. So, you know, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I want to get back, if it's cool with you, to Tough Crowd for a second, because when I started in 2004. Tough Crowd was like my absolute favorite show, because I wasn't fully I didn't dive into stand-up yet, but I was obsessed with it, and I was familiar with a lot of comics, so it was heaven for me to watch, Geraldo and Patrice and Colin Quinn and all these comics just bullshit. So what was it like working there?
I mean, hold on one second. Oh, sorry about that. I disconnected my mic by accident. It was very, I don't know. It was only a year of my life, which at the time felt like a very long time, and now feels like a very short time. It was strange because, you were doing a lot of writing for a show that to the average person probably looked like it had no writing. And so,
I totally see what you mean.
And so it was almost like you were kind of almost trying to hide the writing that you did. I mean, the stuff that was written isn't what the show was really remembered for. It was the banter. We would be more in charge of like coming up with the topics and writing the copy that Colin would ignore in the prompter, and coming up at the time in the middle of the show, what we would refer to as Act 3, we would have some sort of sketch or bit, and we would do a lot of writing for that. And then we would also kind of be available for the comedians to bounce material, like if they wanted to bounce stuff off of you or to get, for you to be able to give them some ideas. And some comics were far more receptive to that than others.
Yeah, of course.
And again, this is just my own personal perspective on things. A lot of the comics who thought they were too good for that would eat a dick. And a lot of the comics who would ask you to, hey, would you mind sitting down and tell me if you think this is funny, were the ones who did really well on the show. Like Jim Norton was always super great to work with. Which, persona wise, you wouldn't necessarily have thought that would be the case, because his persona is such a singular comedy idea. But he was always like, he would run bits by you or run stuff by you, and if you had something, he would listen to you. Geraldo was kind of the same way. Patrice, no way. No way. There's nothing you could tell Patrice. And that was obviously part of his charm. I personally never got along with him and didn't like him very much, and he didn't like me. And I mean, he didn't really know me or give a shit about me, but he is not somebody who I really looked forward to seeing on a semi-regular basis. But part of that was my insecurity as a young comic, and because Patrice would have that thing where he would see insecurity on you and just immediately point it out. He would just pick at it, and which is hilarious. I mean, Elephant in the Room is probably one of my top 10 favorite specials, but it was something I had to come to accept because I had such negative feelings about him as a person. Because he was just mean to me. He was just flat out fucking mean to me. And I had a big bug up my butt about like first of all, I didn't play the seller because I always hated the seller guy persona. Like it really bothered me. And I always kind of thought to myself, like, I'm going to prove that I don't have to play the seller and I can still be successful in comedy. Like I have a weird thing about like, I don't want to fuck the prom queen. Like I don't want to, you think you're so great because you're a club. It's like, fuck that. I'm going to not do the seller, and I'm going to show you that nobody has to do the seller, which was so fucking stupid of me. And it was something that I literally only got over in January of 2020. And I finally started playing the seller in 2020. And I was like, why did I do this to myself? Why did I have this grudge that nobody cared about but me? And I loved playing the seller. It was a lot of fun. And then, not even 2 months later, then quarantine started. So, and again, though, they're just sets. It's not like you go into the cellar and it's a different vibe. It's still an audience. It's still a microphone. It's still a stage. It's not like you walk into there and you are transported to Narnia. It's a comedy club. But
I know, but it has that from Philly. Obviously, I spent 1 year in New York, but I hung out at the cellar the most. Like it was such a cool spot for me because I remember I was sitting in between Colin Quinn and Nick DiPaolo watching Dave Attell, and as a huge comedy fan, like it was just the fucking coolest thing.
Yeah, there's something in me that I've just always resisted those kind of things. I'm not saying it's a positive personality trait, but it's a personality trait. Whereas like I get super uncomfortable if I feel like I'm a weasel or if like I'm uninvited. I'm very susceptible to feeling uninvited and taking that personally. Oftentimes I project that like, oh, I'm going to reject you before you reject me. And so that the whole idea of even in when I was playing it in January in 2020, like I'd go in there and there'd be that table upstairs, the olive tree that everyone would be sitting at. And there'd be comics who I get along with everywhere but there. If I were to see them at different clubs, we would have a friendly conversation. But for some reason, they're sitting at that table and I don't feel like I belong, even though I've been doing comedy longer than them. It's a very weird thing. It's much more about me. But I also feel like comics act differently at the Cellar than they do other places. And I don't like the way it makes people act.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I always felt like an outsider there because I wasn't a New York comic. But I'd always sit like 2 tables over from the comics table and just like casually observe, probably looked creepy as fuck, but I was always just glance over to see who was there, who was going on next, who just came up the stairs, just all this fucking.
I was
always by myself. I was always by myself.
A lot of comics like that I would see at the Cellar. It's like they talk louder there for some reason, like as if they're trying to sort of perform for people. It's like a personal thing. I hate when people perform conversations.
Oh, dude, it's unbearable.
Yeah, and that's to me what a lot of that Cellar table feels like. But
that and like people who are just always on.
Yeah,
like,
and I think a lot of it honestly,
is exhausting.
And a lot of it was based on Tough Crowd. Like, they grew up. When they first started doing comedy or started thinking about doing comedy, they watched Tough Crowd. They watched Louis. They watched all these shows that they had this sort of deified idea of the Cellar table, and therefore when they would actually get to the Cellar and sit at that table, they would act that part. They would be louder and more ball busty than felt natural or rational. You know what I mean? Like
what its own small bubble.
Stop it. Yeah. What to use Cellar parlance. Stop it, stupid.
So like in comedy, like one of the greatest things that can happen to you early on is when a headliner like latches on you and takes you around, or even gets you a gig here or a gig there. What comics were good to you or helped you out, in the early years?
Well, Greg, and again, I don't necessarily. I mean, I think that if Greg didn't like me, he would have told our manager at the time to stop booking me to open for him. But Greg certainly. Todd Barry was nicer than he had to be, for sure.
He's great. I love that all his albums have like 55 tracks.
Yeah. Jim Gaffigan has always been really super helpful to me. I've known Jim for a long time, and he was the first guy I actually opened for at a legit road club, like the West Palm Beach Improv. I opened for Jim, and
very cool.
Yeah, and I think I got along with his wife really well, which helped. And I actually, I was a script consultant on the season 2 of Jim's show, and I think one of the reasons that they asked me to come in was because I got along with both of them very well. And Jim and I don't open for Jim that much, or I haven't, because our acts don't necessarily always go well together. Because I'm a little maybe, either dirtier or just meaner than his audience would want to see. But he's
That's
always
where
been,
Ted Alexandro comes in.
Yeah, I mean, he's always been super, super helpful and very supportive, not just of me, but also of my wife's venue and stuff like that. They shot an episode of that show at QED, like right when it just opened, in an episode that I kind of helped like come up with. So that was kind of cool.
That's really cool. That's awesome.
It was funny because it was very much based on his and my sort of, cool kid versus old club comic insecurities, where, Jim goes off and tries to perform at like a cool alt space, and it's, and everybody in the audience looks like children to him and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, those three certainly, although I've never really opened for her on the road, Janine Garofalo has always been I've always really gotten along with Janine and had really great conversations with her. And she's so super open with her opinions about, clubs or, places to go when you're traveling to certain cities, or just in terms of writing styles and techniques. And obviously Janine is, by her own determination, not everyone's cup of tea. But she's so just completely willing to talk shop in a way that doesn't feel clubby, because she's not really a club comic. It's like a nice combination of someone who isn't, sort of a comedy robot, which is the way I think of a lot of too many club comics, but she still wants to talk about comedy. Like, she's not like too cool to talk about bits and jokes and tags and stuff like that. And obviously I'd always idolized her because of Ben Stiller's show. And so I feel very thankful that I've had as many nice conversations with her as I've had.
That's awesome. I only met her one time. I opened for her on a Sunday with a one-nighter at the Stress Factory in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And she could not have been nicer or more cool.
Yeah.
She was like, do as much time as you want. I did like, it was just a 2-person show, just me and her. I did like 25 up front. Her crowd was phenomenal. They were awesome. And she watched my whole set. She didn't have to.
Yeah.
And we were just talking in the green room, and it was just such a cool, just shooting the shit with another comic. She was complimentary, and then I never saw her again.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sometimes the pitfall, and we've been going on for a long time now, but I'll try to keep this concise. But one of the things I admire about the club world is this idea that, I'm going to be able to try to perform for anybody who walks through that door. I'm going to try to make them laugh with my material. But the downside to that is that you don't get those niche fans who are fans of you, you're not just the guy on stage, they love you. And so it's like the people that come out to see Janine, like if you're just there because it's, hey, we're going to a comedy club because it's Kim's birthday or it's somebody's bachelorette party and we're just going to go to the comedy club, what Janine does may not be your cup of tea. But for the people who it is their cup of tea, they're going to come back and see her all the time. And if you do it long enough and you cultivate that kind of audience, then you're going to have a room full of people who are there to see you and what you do. And then sometimes when club comics like yourself or whatever open for Janine or whatever, it's a shock just how awesome those audiences are. Because they're all there for the right reasons. They're all there to see a specific comic. They're not just coming to the club, And man, is that is as good as it gets when you get an audience full of people who are there to see a specific comic because they love comedy.
It is. And so to tag on to what you said there, sometimes it could be a two-way street. I opened for Sebastian Maniscalco a lot on some theater gigs for like 2 years straight. He was very, very good to me. We were in a lot of theaters, and sometimes I would walk off that stage a king because the crowd knows they're there to see Sebastian. They trust his opener. They're out for a great night. And then other nights, holy shit, did they just want Sebastian?
Yeah.
And they're like, who the fuck is this guy? It's like, first of all, I'm only doing 15 minutes. Just sit down, shut up. It's 15 minutes. But yeah, it was 90% awesome because these crowds were out for a great evening. But that 10%, man, I could tell within the first 2 minutes, oh, they just want Sebastian.
Yeah. There's certain comics who, there's this idea in comedy that somehow, hey, it's all comedy and all comedy is liked by all people. It's just not the case. I mean, and if you were to go see Miley Cyrus and Metallica was opening or vice versa, that would seem weird to you, or pick two disparate artists in different genres. And yet for some reason in the comedy world, we just expect that anybody should be able to open for anybody, which is just not the case. Like, nothing against Sebastian, who I do not know personally, but I would never want to perform for his audience just because they would not like what I do. And to be quite frank, I don't really have a desire to entertain them. It's just not every comedian is for every audience, and not every audience is for every comedian.
Absolutely. That's been said throughout time. It was funny though. Like, you do learn a lot when you open for acts in like a theater though. Like, it's so interesting to watch. I remember so I would do 15, Sebastian would do anywhere from like 75 to 90 minutes. And one show on Long Island, this crowd, they were so rude for me. I could not corral them to save my life. And Sebastian couldn't get him. And he did 45 minutes. At 45, he walked off stage, and I thought something was like terribly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the crowd was just shitty, but he walks by me and he goes, "Fuck these people." And I thought that was so cool that he's headlining a 1,200 seater. They weren't a good crowd. He didn't give them a show. Like it was so cool. I don't know. I think about that like all the time. Like the crowd themselves were so bad, they deprived themselves of 45 more minutes.
Yeah. One of my favorite dick moves to do to another comedian is when they get off stage, just say, "Hey man, fuck these people. You're funny."
You probably did that to me. Dude, well, I'm not going to tie your whole day up here, dude. I thank you for coming on and talking to me. I appreciate it. This is like my favorite thing, just shooting the shit with comics. And,
My pleasure, man. Thanks.
It's great to do it during a time where we can't really perform as much. So just appreciate you coming on here and coming here and just chatting. Is there anything you want to plug for my listener?
Well, I do have I have 4 albums on iTunes, and the 5th will be coming out in early 2021. It's something I shot in the backyard of my wife's venue for a capacity crowd of 28. And there's it's a comedy special, but then there's a few added little fun elements to it. And it's going to be called Show Your Work, live at QED. And that'll be coming out hopefully in early 2021.
Very cool, man. I look forward to watching it. I'll absolutely check that out.
Thanks, dude.
28 people. I like it. I'm doing this recording this weekend, and I have so the ballroom holds 250, but we're using the whole entire giant ballroom for 60 people. So 2020.
Yeah, it's all about miking it, baby. You got to mic
Yep. Oh, yeah. Pumping the 1960s Monty Python laugh track. And we'll go for it. All right, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, dude.
Pleasure's mine.
Finnegan.
Thanks.